We're going to talk about DevSecOps today. My name is Ray Quinones, Cloud Solution Architect for our Fanatical Support in AWS. Been with Rackspace 7.5 years.
I'm Brad Schulteis. I'm a Senior AWS and Security Architect. Been with Rackspace for about 1.5 years, and I joined when we launched our Fanatical Support for AWS services.
Today's webinar is going to cover DevSecOps, and within the agenda, we're really going to cover some major items around pillars, tools, and goals. So understanding where DevSecOps is in the market and where the goal is for a business to be able to start evaluating to get to that next step.
Yeah, we're going to talk about how we got to DevSecOps, where we were before, and kind of how we move forward from here.
I think most of us can quickly remember life before DevOps. It was the isolation between developers and operators. Code would get worked on in development, flipped over the fence to operation, and then it becomes literally somebody else's problem.
Yep, I think just about every organization I've worked in, this was a common theme. So the developers do their thing, they build a bunch of different capabilities, and then they essentially hand them off to the operations team, and never the two shall meet.
Let's talk about those capabilities and what was in the development scope. So in those old days, it was, how did you have to manage code and manage infrastructure before DevOps? It was the waterfall model.
Yeah, so essentially you'd build up this huge backlog of all these changes. Maybe once a quarter, if you're lucky, you get to deploy all these things all at once. And then, there's always that last minute rush to try and get your capability in before that deadline. And if you didn't, well, you had to wait another 3 months. And then all of those different capabilities and changes, they were all tested in a vacuum against the previous baseline. So we never really tried all 100 of these changes at the same time. What if 2 of them collide? What if 10 of them collide? Essentially, that creates a really big problem for rollback. How do you know what you're rolling back? Do you have to go all the way back to the previous baseline? Maybe you can't even do that now.
So with the consideration of where we were with DevOps and now the introduction of DevSecOps, it's been around for a while, but where was life before DevSecOps? We see a middle part of that word, of that abbreviated word there, of security. So understanding where they fit and what is the responsibility.
Yeah, so some organizations manage to get to this almost nirvana state of DevOps, where the developers and the operators are collaborating and they're on one unified team. But then you still had the security component. So often security was left figuratively and literally with a steaming pile. Really the theme here is that DevSecOps is attempting to integrate security into the process as opposed to making it an afterthought.
This slide is not something I created, but I think, as Brad stated, this is definitely something that speaks to the current setting of a lot of businesses. So it's not the old days. Some of us still live in a world before DevSecOps, or it was where security was the land of the no.
Yeah, often security was where your requirement went to die. It was a kind of an inside joke. Security says, well, you can't do that. Why? Well, because we said so, or because we have a policy that says we can't do it. And that policy was created in the previous millennium. So really the problem, the underlying problem here is that security had no real insight into what you're trying to do. They didn't know what your system did. They didn't know what data it was processing. They didn't know what your business process was. And who knows what else they didn't know. So
oftentimes we think about, the DevOps, the security part of that, putting DevSecOps together, but DevSecOps or DevOpsSec or SecDevOps, how does that fall together?
Yeah, this kind of takes that inside joke a little bit further. So where are you placing security? We are trying to think of it in our definition as being right in the center of things with DevSecOps. But you will hear it called the other things in different organizations. Some organizations are very risk averse and they want to put security right up front, so they want SecDevOps. And a lot of organizations are really still struggling with how to apply security, and they're still in this mentality where you're applying security after the fact, so they naturally think security comes at the end. But again, we're going to be focusing on keeping security right in the middle of things.
So let's make sure we're level setting and setting the expectations correctly. So let's start by defining DevOps. And literally verbatim, it is developers and operators working together to automate software delivery and infrastructure changes. So we look at what the responsibility of a developer is. We look at the responsibility of an operator. And for the DevOps relationship, it's pulling those two business units or pulling those two units together to function as a single business. But Brad, what about security?
That's exactly right. So security, again, an afterthought. But really, security has a very similar goal. In the end, they want to get things done. They just want to get them done securely. So within DevSecOps, we're trying to leverage automation to get the security goals met as well. So we want to prevent security risk and compliance violations in the first place by building in automation of security best practices. We also want to set up monitoring to detect deviations from whatever security best practices we have within our organization.
So I think it's safe to say that security is not the bad guy here. We're trying to put all of these units together so that they function cohesively, so everybody understands what the end goal is. So don't panic. It's time to break the mold.
Yeah, and this is going to be revolutionary for some folks. It's going to take a lot of effort in most organizations to really break that mold.
So let's cover some pillars for DevSecOps. Culture, process, and automation. Taking those together will equal DevSecOps with continuous integration and continuous deployment. And this isn't something that is easy. There's no easy button here. So these are things to work towards.
Exactly. So each one of these three pillars, culture, process, and automation, is going to be a significant challenge. And you aren't going to be able to address one without the other. So they are really pieces of the puzzle to get you to the state you want to be in. And so now we're going to tackle specifically what each of these three components are.
So let's start with culture. Everybody can think of where they are in their company and understand who has the positive mindset of trying to introduce new things to a company from a current status quo to trying to make the business better, faster, stronger. And that really goes from technology to outside of technology. There are the people there who are your promoters, who are willing to embrace change when a new item or feature or tool is introduced, but understanding there that it has to be teamwork. It has to be a shared responsibility between developers, security, and operations.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So building that team or building multiple teams. So we don't want to have silos of capabilities any longer. We want cohesive teams that understand all of the different capabilities and their ramifications as a whole. So we want the developers to understand how to incorporate security from the outset. We want the security guys to understand what the operational requirements are, and we want the operators to understand what they're doing in a security mindset so that everybody has some insight into each other's responsibilities.
And I think, an important part of that is having support from the top down as well. So if somebody brings in a new idea to help the team within the level of the organization, but having management or senior management also back that and push those so that not only is everybody functioning together, but there's a clear understanding by cross-training. So security knows what operations is doing, operation knows what dev's doing, and dev knows and operations know what security you're doing. So process. Process is the second pillar.
Yeah, so we want to think of processes almost like we think of microservices within our application architectures. So we want microprocesses. We don't want the process to be this very long, convoluted workflow. We want processes to be very small and atomic so that we know what the success criteria is for that process, and we know what it means to be successful, and we know what it means to fail, and we can identify that quickly so that when we go through a process, we know this was successful, this didn't work, and we can iterate upon that process to make it work. And we can also identify what roadblocks are preventing a certain process much easier when that process is small. And then we want to make sure this is all documented. We want to make sure, again, we have that leadership support and that's promoted throughout the organization. And again, really hitting this home, being able to identify success and failures and do that in almost near real time.
So now one of the major points of these pillars is automation. So we've talked about culture, we've talked about process, but now let's talk about automation. So what does automation think? Again, it kind of goes back to process. It can mean many things, but when we want to narrow it down to DevSecOps, these are going to be what you're going to evaluate to see what is going to be the specific item that's going to be successful for you. So some of this may be a discovery for you. You know, you definitely want to look inside your business unit and start asking the right questions to start seeding the thought. Is a team already using some of these automation capabilities already? Or is this something completely new to them that they don't have an understanding of?
Yeah, it's going to be key. So automation really is that glue that's going to tie everything together. So we want to ensure that we have a common understanding of what automation means for each process and each capability within your tool set. And we want to make sure that we are applying those throughout all aspects of the lifecycle of whatever we're deploying. So again, we don't want to have security be an afterthought. We want to make sure that security is incorporated throughout. We want to ensure that we're doing things with all of the teams involved cohesively. So all teams are going to have a stake in automation. So not just developers, not just operators. The security folks are going to build automation. Developers are going to have automation, and operators are going to actually consume automation. I've been in a lot of organizations where you have 2 of the 3 pieces, but if you leave one out, it really throws the whole thing on edge, because you may have a way to automate development and a way to automate the deployment into operations, but security comes in after the fact and says, oh, we need to tear all this down and redo this manually because this is what security requirements dictate. So essentially, you just thrown the baby out with the bathwater there.
So within automation, there's just a vast selection of tools, and by no way is this an exhaustive list, but let's go ahead and start with some of the tools, specifically some AWS native tools.
Yeah, so what we've done is actually categorize the tools in terms of the functionality they're providing, and this is really important. So you want to achieve specific things with your tools. You're not just picking tools and adding services because you can. We want to ensure that we are meeting specific fundamental requirements. So we want things for source control. We want something for configuration management. We want something for monitoring. We want things around our CI/CD process, as well as collaboration, and again, security services. So we want to make sure these are all incorporated into the tools we're choosing for the automation. Specifically in AWS, you have a lot of different options. You can consume native services from AWS for just about all these capabilities, but you don't have to. So that's one of the great things about DevSecOps, is that you can use the things you're comfortable with, be that the AWS native services or third-party tools.
Exactly, Brad, third-party tools. So while this looks like a very comprehensive list of what's listed in AWS, third-party tools are changing quickly. Technologies are coming to market just insanely fast, and there are some base tools that are relative to what the AWS native tools are, but this is a consideration, is evaluate, understand, and implement, right? So when you look at implementing a new tool, is the tool going to meet the success criteria? Does it meet security's tool? Is this a hosted tool, or is this a tool that must be implemented inside of the VPC, or is this a tool that must live on-prem?
Yep, and again, keeping with the theme of DevOps here, DevSecOps, we want to ensure that whatever we do, we can undo very quickly. So we might pick a tool today, it works this week, next week we say, oh, well, actually that tool didn't work so well for our process, and we can switch out that tool. We can build tools together, so we can take some of the AWS tools, some of the third-party tools, and build a tool chain using both technologies. And again, maybe something works today, and you go through the entire process. You go to the operational lifecycle, and you realize, hey, that actually, the tool we were using was part of the root cause of a certain failure. So then we want to say, all right, well, we failed, move on, pick a different tool, try it again, iterate, fail fast, and get to get moving toward the end state.
Exactly, Brad. All those points speak exactly towards the DevSecOps overall goals.
Yeah, so important here, again, automation. This is what's going to bring it all together. We want to automate everything that we can possibly automate to eliminate unnecessary failures. So we want to automate the build process, the deployment process, the QA process, and as well as the compliance process. So all of these things can be automated and should be automated. Closely coupled with that is monitoring of all of these things. So if we build automation, we want to build monitoring to ensure that that automation is accomplishing the desired goals. We want to make sure that we are monitoring both the software side of things and the infrastructure side of things, as well as the overarching security and compliance environment of the software and the infrastructure. So there's lots of different areas of monitoring. We want to make sure that we are addressing all of them as holistically as possible.
And I know Brad and I have worked with quite a few customers that are in different positions or different status of different state of where they are within their DevSecOps journey. So within the achieving of those goals that Brad's starting with is being able to get to a zero downtime deployment. So is this your first venture in there, or are you working with a partner internally to ensure that we're checking all the buttons, implementing all the correct technologies, so that when we go from an idea on a whiteboard with our teams, it checks through each stage, DevSecOps, to get to a zero downtime deployment. And not all of those deployments will be successful, because that's the beauty of DevSecOps, is these are tiny incremental changes that, okay, if I do fail, I'm going to fail fast. If I fail often, I'm going to recover. So speed and control is huge here. We know we need to be better, faster, stronger across each part of it, from dev to sec to ops, but control must be maintained to ensure we're protecting the business.
Exactly, and the important point there, kind of drive that home, it's a journey, not a destination. So we are fully aware that some organizations are going to be farther along in their journey, and that's okay. You don't have to get to a zero downtime deployment nirvana state on day one. Just implementing things to get there over time is really the goal. You want to have a process in place, have the automation in place, so that you can achieve those things in the long term, but don't expect to be there immediately, because that culture thing we talked about before is going to be a very big uphill climb to overcome. You may have the other pillars nailed, but culture is really going to be one of the hardest things.
Thank you all very much for your time today. I know we've covered a lot of information from the DevSecOps standpoint. If you have any other questions or would like to follow up with us, please visit our website, rackspace.com, and feel free to reach out to us. Thanks, and have a great day.
Thank you very much.